Hi there, I'm Don.
And hi, I'm Cindy. Welcome to Pearls of Liberty for April 5th, 2014. We wanted to talk a little bit today about First Amendment rights and just the Constitution in general, the Bill of Rights, but really specifically the First Amendment. And our first article is from InfoWars. Boy forced to stop reading Bible in after-school program. The ACLU is defending him, which I suppose is a positive thing. But the fact that he was forced to stop reading his Bible seems like just a significant infringement on his rights.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to speak something here to those who identify themselves with the right and typically demonize the ACLU. We have to recognize when they're doing the right thing, and in this case they are. Yeah, the ACLU has been used to bring in a lot of communist and leftist ideology to try to mainstream some of that, but they often do, or at least historically have, defended individual liberties, and this is a case in point. So please don't short-circuit your brain and think ACLU is for this, therefore it must be bad, and yeah, we have to stop Bible reading. No, we don't. I mean, really, that's the way some people think nowadays. They try to give themselves shortcuts, and you can't do that if you really want to think.
Because people are so determined to hold on to some of their old paradigms and remain in their old paradigms, that if they've created a paradigm for themselves that the ACLU is bad, therefore everything the ACLU does is bad.
Yeah, people do that. I'm convinced that people do that, and don't do it because you're not really thinking when you do that. You're being tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine, as the Bible says. You're not engaging with reality. You've put up a stronghold in your own mind that takes your mind captive to the bad guys instead of to the obedience of Christ.
We have another point of view looking at the same issue, the infringement of First Amendment rights. This was just not the practice of religion, but just free speech. Connecticut student suspended for asking governor questions about gun control, found guilty of harassment and making threats for explaining anti-gun legislation was killing his ammo business.
So if people are put in the position of questioning authority, that's not allowed. Boy, is this a huge red flag for a police state, a tyranny. And I know you got some links on this guy later, but I thought it was just brilliant to characterize your political leanings by asking yourself a question: which would you rather live in, a tyranny or an anarchy? And most people that love freedom would say, well, obviously an anarchy. I would rather have no laws than to have even a benevolent dictator telling me what's right and what's wrong, because in anarchy, every man decides what's right in his own eyes. And here we have a police state that is insisting that you can't question authority. Not good.
You know, I do want to take just this article in a little bit of a different tack, though, because this idea has been presenting itself in my mind, and we've talked about it a little bit. The Bill of Rights is to limit government's behavior toward people and to ensure rights to the people as far as the government is concerned. Now, if this was a private school, would the Bill of Rights have reached there? And this line of what corporations are doing, you know, a lot of the information that goes to the NSA is harvested from corporations. And how can we apply the Bill of Rights and insist on our rights when there's this, so often there's this corporate filter that we have to go through.
I'm not sure. Could you explain a little bit more what you're talking about?
What I'm talking about is the Bill of Rights guarantees our freedoms
As individuals?
as far as, yeah, as far as government is concerned.
Okay, gotcha.
Does the Bill of Rights
Yeah.
guarantee our freedoms if corporations want to limit, the ability to talk?
Right.
For instance, if this was a private school with no public funding, would this school have the right to suspend a student for talking about a topic that the school said we are not going to discuss this topic?
Well, I think the key thing to realize here is that the rights are not granted by the government. As it's stated in the Declaration of Independence, our rights are unalienable or inalienable. And that means that they are given by God. Well, are corporations more powerful than God? No, they're not. So those rights that are stated in the Bill of Rights explicitly say that government cannot violate those rights, but implicitly it is also quite clear that nobody can violate those rights because they are given to us by God. So what recourse do you have when they are violated? Well, we have to be creative there. We have to find ways to object to the tyranny of the corporations that really are, in many respects, more powerful than government now. And of course, at the root of all of that is the monetary system and the need to take back the monetary system for the people, because that's what feeds the corporate beast, the Babylonian world system, and the people need to get that control back. So, but yeah, the Bill of Rights is a government document restricting the power of government, but it is stating what natural law is, and that applies in all situations. So yeah, it's important to take on corporations.
Here is an example of a corporation. We're not taking them on, but this was disappointing. I learned about this on Facebook when a friend who disagrees with me about this issue wrote that Hobby Lobby had been proven to have investments in pharmaceutical companies that make the kinds of drugs that Hobby Lobby is objecting to having to provide to their employees. Now, to me, this hypocrisy doesn't preclude Hobby Lobby's right to still refuse to provide certain kinds of abortifacients. And in case you don't know, Hobby Lobby has been in a Supreme Court struggle because they do not want to be forced to provide health insurance that covers abortions and abortifacient drugs. And because they're Catholic and they don't believe in abortion, so they don't want to pay for abortion. All of a sudden now, we find out that they have been making money from investing in companies that do produce abortifacients.
And I would be willing to bet, I'm not sure, but I very strongly suspect that they have simply not done their due diligence in terms of their investments. And that's very easy to do, where you just give your accountant or broker control to make money, and he invests it in the things that are growing, and it's going to get a return on your investment, and it's almost always values neutral. In other words, you're not screening those companies that you invest in for anything in particular. It's just a financial thing. So I would bet that this claim of hypocrisy is really more due to negligence, and that is even a strong word. It's not like they went out and decided to make money from abortions, as the Huffington Post article likes to headline it. I don't think that's it at all. I think that their accounting and investment strategy simply didn't screen out some of the things that it should have screened out.
Even in light of this, though, I don't, and I'm a little disappointed. I mean, you if you were, had a broker, you would vet this to some extent. You would give him some directives. I don't want to invest in pharmaceutical companies. So they could have done that.
Yeah, they could have done that. And that's what I'm saying. It's negligence on their part, but I doubt if it was intentional.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that, but I think, the main point in light of what we're talking about is the fact that even though they were invested in this company, they were exercising their right to behave in public however they wish within the law. And their objection before the Supreme Court is not, in my mind, at all diminished by this. They still have a right to refuse to pay for abortions and abortifacients based on their free practice of their religion, which is Catholicism.
Right, and I agree with that, but the argument that the other side is using is they're just saying, look, you don't really believe that because look at what you've done. You're a hypocrite. And I'm saying that your measurements are faulty there. It's like swallowing a camel to kill a gnat, or whatever parallel the Christ used was. It's you're comparing two very different things. The investment, it's easy to find hypocrisy, and when you find hypocrisy in any person or institution, does that invalidate the overall aim of the institution? No, and even hypocrisy is a strong word. I think the intent, the overall intent, is what needs to be looked at, and hypocrisy is really more of a putting up of a false front, and I think that doesn't describe the situation at all. I don't know that anybody's quantified the amount of money that Hobby Lobby has supposedly made from their investments in companies that profit from abortions. I doubt if it's significant, and if it is, yeah, I think that needs to be looked at, but just let's keep a perspective is what I'm saying, and let's look at the overall intent.
Yeah, and there are definitely a few layers here, because this the 401k plan featuring several mutual funds investing in pharmaceutical firms. So you'd have to look down a couple layers to see this.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that they, like you said, I don't believe they intentionally were hiding this, and may have not even been fully aware of it.
Yeah.
So there is more. These struggles are continuing, and this is from RT. Just some of they have headlines. Mississippi governor signs religious freedom bill despite LGBT opposition. Mississippi's Republican Governor Phil Bryant has signed into law a bill that will allow businesses to legally refuse services on the basis of their religion. And that seems like a given by the Bill of Rights. It seems like if you're practicing your faith, you certainly refuse to offer service to people when you know that service is going to be applied in a way that is contrary to your faith.
Yeah, it seems obvious that in a free country, a business should be able to decide who they buy and sell to. It's common to walk into a restaurant that says we reserve the right to refuse service. So that's supposed to be standard with all businesses, I believe. And the fact that it's not really, or that it's not a given anymore in terms of the public mindset, says something to the effect that we're really have elevated this God of the corporate financial system above personal beliefs and personal integrity, and that is not a good thing.
I think there's, when you, there's almost an implied affirmation in certain kinds of behavior. Uh, and doing business with somebody, you're kind of you're entering into a sort of partnership with them, and I see this almost as there is a Bible verse that says, "Don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers." You're putting yourself into the place that the person with whom you're doing business is in.
And well,
ideologically.
But that's the extreme case. I think. By and large, most businesses that are owned and run by Christians who want to make a difference in the community are going to see themselves as an outreach of sorts, and want to build friendships, relationships, and business partnerships, even with those that are not believers, in order to help win them over with connections to their faith. Now, that being said, I'm talking about people that are more or less neutral, not people that are enemies. And the gay-lesbian alliance would be probably not in that category, but you do have a lot of unwitting doofuses that just kind of go along with the flow and think that, if you don't serve gays and lesbians, then you must be a hater. So there's so much propaganda now that we really have to cut through all of that and just say, hey, businesses do have the right to conduct business as they see fit. And your home is your castle type of thinking in your business. And I think that makes sense in a society that is claiming to be free.
Well, the big fear in the context of this issue is that many churches and pastors are afraid that they will be forced to perform marriage ceremonies for homosexual couples, and that if they refuse, the state will revoke their 501c3 or whatever their non-profit status is, and in that case they would lose pretty much everything. They would lose their ability to. Now, of course, if it's not necessary to have a 501c3, however, once you have one, any property held under the 501c3 can not be held by you when you lose your 501c3. It can only be sold to another 501c3, and there's just a mare's nest of issues there that you get into. And I think this kind of legislation is trying to protect churches primarily from being forced to perform gay marriages.
Yeah, and of course there are protections that can be built into the church or the institution itself, where you have in your bylaws that you will only perform marriages for people that are attendees, etc. So there's other ways to deal with that, and I think that might be a better first recourse than to rely on the power of the state, which is what's happening here. I mean, the best laws that a state can make are those that back up individual liberty, and that is what is happening here. But it's basically saying that the individual or the institution does have the right to refuse service. So, but again, the individual can, or a church can, defend itself in other ways too, and we don't need to rely on the state to do that for you.
So the First Amendment is definitely under assault, as are virtually all of the amendments in the Bill of Rights, except the one quartering soldiers. Nobody's forcing us to quarter soldiers yet. But pretty much all of the other amendments in the Bill of Rights are are under assault. And we are on the edge of losing them, and the only way for us, I believe, to keep them is that we ourselves enforce them by personally insisting that they be granted us. Now, one thing that Don and I have talked about in the past, and one thing that Alex Jones and his guest talked about yesterday, is the possibility of a constitutional convention. And that would be to basically insist that the Bill of Rights is observed. However, once the Constitutional Convention is convened, pretty much anything can happen, right?
Yeah, and the danger here is that you get people that are too trusting of the state and don't put in adequate protections into a new constitution. And I'm afraid that that is what our mindset, the common mindset, is today. Now, hopefully you would get more liberty-oriented people involved in a constitutional convention, but I would not necessarily say that that's a given. So at this point, I'm not at all convinced that there's a need for it. I think there's a need for actually applying the 10th Amendment and the other amendments that are the checks and balances and the natural the divisions of government that the Constitution contains. We've got a long way to go in simply applying and insisting on the Constitution that we've got. The state power is supposed to trump federal power, etc. This is a great discussion with this guest, Robert Blecker, and I do recommend listening to it. He makes a lot of excellent points and saying how far down the line do you go in terms of supporting the individual. At what point does the state have power to trump the individual, etc. So there's a discussion with some ideas that are well worth thinking about here.
And there were two clips from yesterday, and then of course there's Alex's full show as well. So we're hoping that this has shed some light on some of the First Amendment issues, and we're sure that you're also aware of them. But we just wanted to kind of bring to light some of the recent developments, and especially mention the Hobby Lobby. And just hopefully offer some encouragement that the Bill of Rights, we are under law guaranteed these freedoms, but we ourselves have to be the ones to practice them and insist that we be allowed to practice them.
Yeah, that needs to be our habit. We need to not have the habit of trusting government, but have the habit of insisting that we do have unalienable rights from God to that we should not allow to be usurped by the state. And it's not the state that grants them to us, it's God. And Christians especially need to have that mindset. We've given over that mindset to an undue trust in government. And it's time that we reverse that direction.
And of course, especially in practicing our faith, we believe that God Himself, according to Bible verses like are found in Psalm 2, and just the general idea that it is God Himself permitting us to work alongside Him, who triumphs ultimately over evil, and our hope in Him is that we are able to overcome and overthrow the tyranny that has encroached upon us. And we believe that the evil side is aware of this and intentionally tries to separate us from our faith.
Right, and historically it really has been Christians that have been the number one front line against tyrannical governments, because they recognized when the king or the sovereign in the type of a monarchy was really putting himself in the place of God and making decisions that really only God should allowed to make, and was making them unjustly. So the people need to function as that conscience, or you don't have a government that is reined in, under control, and really ultimately blessed by God, because you have people in government that usurp power and tend to suffer from megalomania. And it's the duty of Christians to bring that back, not exactly into balance, but really to bring, to bring that down, to bring that haughty mindset of rulers back to a place of humility before God.
Sounds good to me. Thank you for tuning in for this week's Pearls of Liberty, and we hope that you're having a pleasant weekend.
As always, we remind you to see the world the way that it really is, see yourself in it, walk your walk. You are the one you've been waiting for.